with another video that concerns osteology introduction. As always, we are still in osteology introduction, and this time we will finish with the axial skeleton. Before starting the appendicular skeleton, we will firstly finish the axial skeleton by the thoracic cage and the vertebral column in the next video. Today we will discuss the thoracic cage, and the content will be, we will discuss the role of the rib cage. The rib cage is also called the thoracic cage. The main features or characteristics of the cage, parts and location of the sternum. We will define a rib, what is a rib. And then we will see the three main classification of ribs. And also we will take one rib and see its components and features and so. And lastly we will discuss the movements executed by the thoracic cage. I mean the pump handle movement and the picket handle movement. We will explain them, and let's start by the role of the skeleton. As you see here, the thoracic cage, the role of the thoracic cage. The thoracic cage is like the bird cage, okay, like you see in the picture. The thoracic cage seems the bird cage, okay. And this makes us conclude the role of the thoracic cage in terms of protection. Like the bird cage protects the birds, the thoracic cage protects our thoracic viscera and organs, and so it's all about protection. We said in the last videos that the skeletal system is about the protection of our internal organs. So the thoracic cage is a protective enclosure of the thoracic cavity and the superior viscera of the abdominal cavity. Thoracic cavity means the heart and the two lungs. They are enclosed by the thoracic cage, and also the superior viscera of the abdominal cavity. For example, we have the diaphragm. Diaphragm is the superior wall of the abdominal cavity, located here. This is the diaphragm, it is located here, okay. So now let's move to see some important features and borders in this model here. As you see here, this is the 3D model of the skeletal system, and this is the rib cage. This is the rib cage, as you see here, okay. Superiorly you see this aperture, this opening, okay. Superiorly we have an opening. Let's define it. This is an opening superiorly. This is the superior border of the rib cage, which is called the superior thoracic aperture, okay. Now inferiorly, as you see here, let's define the superior opening of the thoracic cage, the superior border of the thoracic cage. The inferior border of the thoracic cage is formed by the costal margin, okay. We'll discuss the costal margin in more details. So the thoracic cage is bordered superiorly by the superior thoracic aperture and inferiorly by this costal margin. Also we have laterally the lateral borders of the thoracic cage is formed by the ribs, okay. 12 ribs on each side forming the lateral walls of the thoracic cage. And lastly we have this bone here, the sternum. It's what boards the thoracic cage anteriorly. It is located at the midline and boarding the thoracic cage anteriorly, okay. So let's return here. We discussed the important features. The borders, we have the superior border is formed by the superior thoracic aperture. The inferior border is formed by the costal margin. The lateral border is formed by the ribs, 12 ribs on each side. And then lastly the anterior border is formed by the sternum, okay. Now let's start discussing the first bone of the rib cage, the sternum. The sternum is also called the breastbone. This is the sternum. It is called the breastbone, عظم الصدر, okay. It is located along the midline of the rib cage. It is located along the midline, okay. It provides an articular surfaces of the clavicle and the ribs from 1 to 10, okay. Let's see it here. Here we have, this is the clavicle, and the ribs from 1 to 10 are joining with the sternum. Okay, the sternum provides an articular surfaces for the clavicle and the ribs from 1 to 10. The components of the sternum are superiorly the manubrium, centrally the body of the sternum, and lastly inferiorly the xiphoid process. We will discuss them one by one. Okay, let's see, this is another diaphragm of the thoracic cage. This is the thoracic cage and this is the sternum. Okay, we will return here. So let's start with the manubrium. The manubrium is the superior portion of the sternum. At the top of the manubrium we will find the jugular notch. Let's see it here. Here, as you see here, this is the manubrium, the superior portion of the sternum. The superior portion of the manubrium is the jugular notch. I have a note here is that the jugular notch can easily be palpated underneath the neck, تحت الرقبة. When we palpate, we feel a notch. This is called the jugular notch or an opening. Okay. Also, the manubrium provides an articular surface for the clavicle. On either sides of the jugular notch, you see two clavicular notches for the attachment of the clavicle. Also, we have an attachment site for the first rib. Okay, only the first rib is joining with the manubrium. Okay. Now let's move to the body of the sternum. It is the central and elongated portion. Its main feature is the sternal angle. Okay, here the main feature of this is the body of the sternum. The main feature is the sternal angle, which is the joint between the manubrium superiorly and the body inferiorly. Also, the ribs attaching to the body, we have the second rib attaching directly to the sternal angle. Also, the ribs, this is the second rib, and also the ribs from 3 to 7 are attaching with the body of the sternum. Okay, and then lastly, the xiphoid process. The xiphoid process is the inferior portion, and it is cartilaginous in younger people. The xiphoid process starts cartilaginous and then ossify. Okay, here let's see the xiphoid process. The xiphoid process is located here. Okay, now let's move to the pump handle movement. The pump handle movements is the best example explaining the movement of the sternum. This is a pump. Okay, this is a pump or faucet. A pump means in Arabic صنبور الماء. Okay, and this is the handle of the pump. The handle in Arabic البواني تاع الصنبور هذاك. Okay, when we open this pump, okay, the same movement is executed by the sternum. I mean, من نفتحو هذاك البواني كي نحلوه تقعد une portion تقعد fixe, une portion تقعد fixe و une portion تطلع. The same thing with the sternum. The manubrium of the sternum in the movement, the manubrium of the sternum stays fixed, and the rest parts of the sternum, it's what execute this movement, the pump handle movement. Okay, I wish you can understand this movement now. This is called the pump handle movement. Okay, now we finished with the sternum. Now let's discuss the ribs. Definition of a rib. A rib is a curved structure. A curved, okay, not straight. This is straight and this is curved. The ribs are curved, okay. It is the major component of the anterior thorax. Okay, I forget it. The major component of the anterior thorax. Before we see, this is the 3D model as always, and this is the ribs. The ribs are the major components of the anterior thorax, and we have 12 on each side. Okay, 12 here and 12 here. Okay, So let's return. Articulate the ribs, articulate posteriorly with the T1 to T12 thoracic vertebra. We will discuss the vertebral column later, but we have 12 thoracic vertebra from T1 to T12, all attached with the rib cage. Okay, here, as always. Okay, here, this is the vertebral column. Here we have 12 thoracic vertebra from T1 to T12, or are attaching with the 12 ribs. Okay, I'm sorry. So here, now let's see the ribs classification. We have three sorts of ribs. The classification is dependent on the attachment with the sternum. Okay, we have, for example, the true ribs. The true ribs, their costal cartilages attach directly to the sternum. In the picture here, we have the true ribs from 1 to 7. The costal cartilages are, this is in blue, the costal cartilages attach directly to the sternum from 1 to 7, and this means they are called true ribs. Okay, let's return. Secondly, the second classification, false ribs. False ribs, their costal cartilages form a single cartilage that attach to the sternum. Let's return to the picture. We have the false ribs. False ribs from 8 to 10. The false ribs, for example, here the 8th, 9th, and 10th ribs all form one costal cartilages that attach to the sternum. Okay, the same thing here. 8th, 9th, 10th ribs all attach, form one costal cartilages that attach to the sternum. Okay, and then lastly, we have the floating ribs. Floating means free ribs that don't have cartilages. Instead, they attach in the posterior abdominal wall. Okay, here in the picture, the floating ribs don't have cartilages. Instead, they attach to the abdominal wall. The false ribs, this is the 11th and the 12th. 11th and 12 are called, they are called floating or free ribs that attach to the abdominal wall and the vertebra. Okay, they don't have costal cartilages. Now let's see the components of a rib. We take a typical rib, okay, because ribs differ. The typical ribs are, for example, the 7th, 8th ribs, okay. Their anterior portion joins with the costal cartilages extended to the sternum. The anterior portions of the ribs are all joining with the sternum. The posterior portion, the posterior portion is the most complicated portion of the rib because it's composed of many features, composed of a head and tubercle, neck and body. Let's see it in the picture. This is a typical rib here, and this is its anterior portion, which is joining with by the costal cartilage with the sternum. The posterior portion is formed by the head, okay, neck, tubercle, and we have many features. One of these features is the body or the shaft. Also, we have the angle and the costal groove. Okay, the head of the costal, the head of the posterior portion of the rib is joining with the body of the vertebral column. Okay, the neck is joining the head with the tubercle. And the tubercle joins with the transverse process of the vertebra. Okay, we see it here in the picture. As you see here, this is a costovertebral joint. This is the head of the rib is joining with this is the head of the rib, and this is the body of the vertebra. The head is joining with the body. Also, let's see it here, another picture. We have, this is the tubercle of the rib. Tubercle of the rib is joining with the transverse process of the vertebra, and this joint called costotransverse joint. Okay, let's see what I wrote here. A head of the rib articulates with the body of the vertebra, the tubercle joining with the transverse process of the vertebra, the neck, and the body or the shaft. This is another diagram showing the components of a rib. We have, as you see here, the head joining with the body of the vertebra, the neck joining the head with the tubercle articulating with the transverse process of the vertebra. We have this costal groove for the attachment of intercostal muscles, and also we have the body of the rib or the shaft. Okay, let's discuss now the costal margin. The costal margin is composed of, this is the costal margin area, is composed of the 11th and 12th ribs. The 11th and 12th ribs form this costal margin that we can palpate underneath our chests. Okay. Also, we have here, this is the jugular notch that we can palpate. We have also the sternal angle, and lastly the costal margin. And lastly, let's discuss a little bit the picket handle movement. This is a picket. Picket means in Arabic dalu. Okay, when we handle, this is the handle of the picket. Okay, when we raise this picket, this movement is the same movement executed by the thoracic cage or the ribs. Okay, the same movement when we at the process of respiration, the same movement of the picket handle is executed by the thoracic cage. Okay.